Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I am your host, JP John Paz. With me today, very special guest, former WWF backstage announcer, commentator. He is a legendary voice when you're looking at the world of the World Wrestling Federation. He is Mr. Shawn Mooney. Shawn, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, John. Nice to see you.
What is going on in your world? Because I know Hastel Toys now has a new Shawn Mooney action figure. I mean, you're all over the place. So what's going on in your world?
Well, it's really been amazing. This action figure is 30 plus years in the making because I just missed out when I left the WWE back in it was 93, and they hadn't really, they'd been doing action figures, but they hadn't done really any of the announcers. So I missed out. And Gene had quite a few of them done, and the other announcers, Bobby and Gorilla. But over the years, people had contacted me about maybe doing something, and some people had made some of the action figures on their own, and you'd see them out there. But Mitch with Hastel Toy contacted me, and I'd seen his work that he had done, and he has done a bunch of figures that Mattel missed out on, and just some fantastic work. I looked at a lot of the action figures he put out, and then also talked to some people who had worked with him, and they said, "Oh yeah, it's all great." And it was a really wonderful process. They walked me through the whole thing. He sent me prototypes and 3D images that they were doing, and I tell you, the way it's come out is, I look back at what I looked like back then before I got so old, and they did a hell of a job. I mean, it's really a great action figure. And what else is tremendous about it is that a lot of people know that Lord Alfred Hayes and I were a couple of amigos back then. We were very close. We lived in Stamford together. We did all kinds of Coliseum home videos together. We did play-by-play together. And Mitch, in our conversations, I said, "Are there any plans to do one for Alfred?" And I don't know. It was just kind of an overlooked thing that he hadn't really thought about it. But he got in touch with Alfred's son, Kirsten, and anyway, pretty much at the same time, they put an Alfred action figure together, and we've been released at the same time with this new group that they have out. I think there's 6 of them, and then they went even further. The one that's out now is pretty much the announcer, the event center Mooney, with the blazer and the WWF tie, and they even put the logo on. It's not the WWF logo, but they used the Hastel Toy logo on it. But it's really, I mean, down to the detail. And that one's coming out. That one is out, and Alfred's is out as well. But they also are doing an announce team pairing of us. It's the 2 of us. We have the headsets with tuxedos on, and that's going to be out in a few months as well. So it's been really cool, that whole process. So they're out there, hasteltoy.com, and that's with 2 T's, HASTTEL toy.com, and it's right there on the front page. Can't miss it.
They do some great stuff, and that's an
Yeah,
awesome idea because you and Lord Alfred, I mean, that's a great
yeah.
tandem. Everyone always talks about, all these other announced team tandems, but that was a lot of fun. And listening to me back even to some old Coliseum videos recently, hearing you guys calling the action together, a lot of fun stuff between you 2.
Yeah, we really did have a blast together. Alfred had a tremendous sense of humor. I think people saw that in some of the stuff we did, but behind the scenes, he was even funnier. And we got to travel with each other all over the world. We went to the UK a couple of times, and that's another thing that's coming up, is that I'm doing the for the love of wrestling in Manchester, England, and that is coming up February 15th and 16th. And I have not been over to the UK since those trips. That's a long time ago. But what is amazing, and not so much when you think about the backstory to it, but I still get mail from people over there. I still hear from people here, but from over there, it's just incredible. And it took me a while to figure it out, why, of all places. But then again, when you think about it, when the World Wrestling Federation, which it was at the time, and we keep saying WWE, but they wanted to expand internationally, and the UK was where they really started. It was on Sky Television over there, and then of course they started distributing those Coliseum home videos, which I don't even know how many I did, a lot. But that was their first exposure to the WWE, was through Sky Television, and I, doing the event center, was the first person that localized it for them. And what I mean by that, and I'm sure John, you remember the event center, and
Yeah.
it was brilliant in the sense that before that, Gene did all of those interviews at arenas where he would have to spend basically an entire day grabbing superstars, and they would push the events by doing these 2-minute interviews. They were brutal. You can imagine just doing that. Well, somebody came up with the idea that, hey, we should do what we'll call the event center. The boys, all they'll have to do is generic interviews, and then we'll have a person customize it, which was me, where I would say, coming up at the Meadowlands this Saturday night, Hulk Hogan facing the Ultimate Warrior. And folks, I know you guys down there in Paramus, you love the Hulkster. You're not going to want to miss this. And I would localize it. I'd bring it home and talk about their community. And that was, Gene was a genius in that sense, that the thing about him is Gene made you feel like you were his buddy. You would want to have a beer with Gene. And one of his secrets was that wherever the town was that he was going to do, and he traveled all over the country, he would make notes of different places, bars that he went to, things that were near the arena, uh, specific names of people that others might know, within the city or the town, whatever it was. And he told me that. He said, when you do these, get the travel guides. We didn't have the internet back then, and we get the travel guys, and I would look and I'd, find different bars. And when I go to cities, I do the same thing. And what it did is it put me there. It made me feel like, okay, man, he knows our town, he knows our city. Well, I did the same thing when we were doing the United Kingdom custom markets that we did. So it really endeared me to the people over there, because the other superstars weren't able to do that. They were doing the generic stuff, but I was the one that was actually customizing these places in the towns that we were going to over there, the cities. So when we went over there for the first time, and I think we did a show at the Royal Albert Hall, and I was just amazed by, I was known here from being in every show we did, but the response there just blew me away. And I remember being just taken aback. Like, they put me on the same level as Bobby and Gene and some of the superstars. They wanted to meet me and all this. And then I was like, now I get it, because I sound like I've been here. I sound like I've been to places they've been to. And so it was kind of started this relationship with them that's never changed. They called me the lad. And so I'm anxious to go back there. I don't know if anybody remember me because it's so long ago, but it's a great event that's happening. And I was going to go before the pandemic, and everything fell apart then, of course, as everybody knows. And so it's happening. It's about 3 weeks away. We're going to go out there, and I'm really looking forward to it. But the great show, they've got all kinds of, Ric Flair is going to be there, and Jake Roberts is going to be there, Lex Luger and Sting. And so it's a big show, and I can't wait to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely loaded. I feel like if you're from certain period of WWF, like the boom period, the hot period,
Mhm.
nobody forgets you. Like you're remembered forever. Like I really have that feeling, because anybody that was anybody, and obviously you were on TV all the time, everybody very familiar with
Mhm.
you. Those fans don't forget that hot boom period. They're the real hot boom period. It's like what kind of created what we see today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just an era for professional wrestling that can never be matched. We've seen, other periods where it's been hot, and how the business goes up and down, but really that's where it really all started. Professional wrestling completely changed during that era that I was very fortunate to be a part of. Once uh, Vince started this, and Hulk Hogan came in, it was it just began to peak, and that was in that period of 80s or early 80s all the way through early 90s. And that's when I was there. And you're right, it's just it was a period of time that was magical. And you had these superstars that people just fell in love with. They were old school guys. They took the business very seriously, and the storylines were just great. It really is a period of time that has never been matched. It never will again. I think during the period of The Rock and Stone Cold and DX, that was another time when it really did take off. But nothing, just because of how it changed the world of professional wrestling. I think that's why people love and remember it so much. And I look at it as a sense of, I was one of the players. I was on a show that everybody loved, and it brings back great memories for them. Most of them were very young at the time. They liken it to just pure joy in their lives and bonding with their fathers or their uncles or their brothers. Everybody had this, their favorite guys, and, doing crazy moves off the couch and putting the couch pillows on the floor and body slamming their brothers. And it's just, it's something they never forget. And it brings it all back to them when they see people, that were part of that era, Jake and the rest of these tremendous superstars that were part of it.
Absolutely. I always say if that era didn't happen, who knows what happens? I mean, does the Austin era even happen? And this boom period now,
yeah,
doesn't happen
it
without that
doesn't.
era.
It doesn't. Without, I had this discussion the other day that without Hulk Hogan, none of this happens. And regardless what people think of the Hulkster or anything, you've got to just give him credit that he changed the entire world of professional wrestling, and it was never the same after.
That's the thing too. Michael Cole even said it on air. He said if Hulk Hogan wasn't here, he goes, we wouldn't even be here today celebrating Raw on Netflix.
You wouldn't have wanted to chat with me. I would be just some guy from Tucson who'd visited Jersey a couple of times.
That is true. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know obviously fans can boo and they can do whatever they want to show, but like they don't. You got to kind of realize. I don't even know if you'd be at the show right now if there wasn't for Hulk. Vince. I don't even know if Vince would be Vince without Hulk.
Well, think about it, John. We might still be seeing these territories. The country still might be divided by wrestling outfits that bring 400 or 500 people into an arena. Maybe we don't. Who knows? It could have still been like that. There might have never been that peak of it becoming mainstream entertainment. So
true.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I made a joke. I was interviewing an old wrestler a few weeks ago. I made the joke. I said, if Hogan didn't exist, Vince McMahon may still be selling hot dogs out of a hockey arena in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows what he might have ended up doing, but knowing Vince McMahon, he was going to find a way to be successful because that's in his inner being. It was not going to stop until he reached it. But he got lightning in a bottle. He found Hulk Hogan, recognized what he could do, and together they made history.
Absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
When you look back, right, at getting into the WWF, how does that even happen? Like, were you a fan and you wanted to get in because you saw, it was getting hot, or how does that even kind of happen? The genesis of it.
John, my story is so crazy. It really doesn't make any sense that I had any business ending up where I did. At the time that I got the audition, I was a producer for Major League Baseball productions in New York City. I had gotten an opportunity to work on a show out here, and they were based in New York. But they shot this show out here called The Baseball Bunch with Johnny Bench in Tucson because of the weather. It was near spring training, and they could get the other Major League Baseball players to come out and appear on the show. I had just gotten out of school. I went to the University of Arizona studying radio television, and a professor told me, I don't know if they're still hiring, but I got this number of this guy. And long story long, I guess, I called the guy, talked my way onto the set, and worked for them and bugged the crap out of them because I was trying to get a job. My plan was to go to Los Angeles and try and get a job as a page at one of the studios out there or something. And this opportunity came up, and they said, if you can get back to New York, we'll give you a job when they were done working here. So that's how I ended up in New York, and then was working as a producer. And I started getting in front of the camera because this is when cable was just really getting it was in its infancy. And so yeah, they had a lot of content that they needed, and they had chances for me to get in front of a camera because there was so much content. So I would host these little baseball roundups and all these things, and they said, hey, he's not too bad in front of a camera. And we ended up doing a show called Light Moments in Sports with Joe Namath. Joe was the host, and I was one of the producers on the show. And they came up with an idea to go out and shoot these segments that would go along, comedic things. I went to, when they had the paint gun things were first starting out, and I went out as a correspondent. They let me get in front of the camera and go out and have people pepper me with paintballs. I went to these things called the Camel Games and rode ostriches. And then one of the stories I did was we went to the Monster Factory. If you remember, Larry Sharp, I think was his name, who ran the school in Jersey. And we went out there, and I was the stupid correspondent guy who thinks that it's easy to be a wrestler, and they beat the living crap out of me. And that was the story. And the way it goes is that it was on NBC affiliates that they was being shown around. And the story goes that Vince actually saw it. I knew a guy who had gone to work for the WWF, and I don't know how Vince found out, or the guy saw me or whatever, but he told Vince, I know that guy. And Vince said, get him up here. Vince thought the segment was funny. And he called me. His name was Scotty. And he said, Vince McMahon wants you to come up here. Now, you mentioned, was I into professional wrestling? I grew up in Tucson. We barely got any shows here. I didn't even really know that much about it at all. Of course, it had taken off with the rock and wrestling. I knew about that. And I was in New York City. And of course, Madison Square Garden and all the stuff that they were doing there with Cyndi Lauper and all these people. So I was certainly aware of it, but I was not, I have to admit that I was not a big wrestling fan. It was just an opportunity to come up here. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell? I mean, I was trying to get out. I didn't want to be a producer. I wanted to be a talent. I figured, well, this is kind of a big deal. At least I'll have the experience of auditioning. And so I had the guy that had contacted me. I said, send me information on all the superstars. And one thing I've done throughout my career, and I worked for Major League Baseball, and I've done all these things in sports. And of course, I was not like a gigantic sports fan, but I always knew what I had to know before I worked. And I had him send me all the pictures, 8x10 pictures of all the superstars. And then I wrote on the back of them every little detail about them that was out there. And I studied them for 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks before I went up there for this audition, and went up there on the train from New York. They put me in the studio. Bruce Pritchard has told the story about, the broom, the famous broom story, sell me this broom. And that's all true. They did that. And they had prepared material that they wanted you to do. And so I just remember there were other people that were auditioning, and I kept thinking, man, I got to do something different that's going to make me stand out. At least they'll remember me. And I had and the way on the train up, I had kind of put together this little skit I was going to do. It was about being a professional wrestling fan, and that you needed to proclaim it to the world. And I don't even remember the whole shtick. But when they got done with the audition and the whole sell me the broom thing, I thought I did okay with it or whatever. I said, hey, they said, all right, thanks. And I said, hey, can I do one more thing? And Bruce was, okay. And I did this little bit. I think that was the thing. And I talked to him later about it. I don't think he even remembered, but I think that's what it was that made me stand out. I only did one audition. 2 weeks later, they called me back, and the guy said, Vince wants you to come work for him. And that was it. I went up and started living in Stamford and did the event center and anything else they told me to do. But that's how it happened. It's kind of a crazy story. It really is, because it came out of nowhere, and maybe that's why it happened that way, because I really just felt like I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm going to give everything I got, and not be. So I wasn't particularly nervous or anxious about it. I just did it, and I think that they kind of saw. Maybe that's what they saw, that this guy's different. Who knows? I really don't. I would love to ask Vince, what the hell did you see in me? Because initially, man, I was awful. I look back at some of those early event centers that I did. Oh my God, I was so bad. And one of the reasons that, and I mean, I take full credit for just being green, not knowing that much about how the business worked, but they assigned Fink was my Howard Finkel was my guide, my coach, my mentor. That's what they to do the event center. Well, Howard was a ring announcer, so he has me. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the event center. Big event taking place this Saturday night. And I was, and I remember thinking, first of all, my voice was killing me after a week, and I kept thinking, this is just ridiculous. I can't keep doing this, and it's not me. And I really thought that if I keep doing this, they're going to fire me. And I just told Howard, I said, Howard, can I just try it my way? And I think that he was, in a sense, kind of relieved, because he didn't know how to tell somebody. He was, he was used to projecting. He wasn't in front of the small camera, that often. And once he did that, he let me go. Then I settled in, and then I just got very comfortable doing it. And that's when I started, making up the nicknames for all the guys, and they just kind of let me do it the way I wanted to do it. The whole thing of the look off camera as we went to their interviews, the reactions coming out of them of just, sometimes never saying a word, and it worked.
That's funny. I was just watching one the other week. It was a prime time, and it's like you looked off.
Yeah.
Like Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zukov, the Bolsheviks, and then you like kind of look off. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where I got that from. I think it was kind of the old sportscaster, where they come off camera. They're not looking at anything.
Yeah.
But they're making it look. I was just watching it. You don't look at it in the camera. You look at it because you got a monitor right here, and you go, there it is right there. That's what's going on. And I would come out, and I said, and yeah, I was. That's where I got that. It was kind of a throwback to the sportscasters. So,
it did seem like you were watching a monitor or something. Like he just watched the Bolsheviks, and he's bringing them back. Yeah, interesting.
No, the only way I knew what I was coming out of is that they had these big, the big sheets, the 8x11 sheets that Howard put together. Howard was in charge of that. No, people may not know that Howard he organized that event center, and he would be there when they do the interviews, because I didn't go to every TV taping, and they would have it on sheets, and it'd be divided up just the way you'd see it in the show. There would be 3 boxes. One was the first hit, one was the second hit in the middle of the show, and one was at the end. There were 3 shots. You did the lead into it. You did a bridge to the next you would throw to first interview, then there'd be a bridge, then you come out and throw it to another interview, and then you would wrap it up. That's the way it's going to be. Don't miss it this Friday night. And that's what I saw in front of me. And then people always ask me, did you use a teleprompter? I mean, how did you sit there all day and do? Well, you basically be saying the same thing, but you couldn't prompter that stuff. That just we didn't have the resources. And what they did do is they would take the card, whatever the card was, they had the teleprompter camera, and they would put these sheets up. Somebody would have to change the sheets, but that's the only way. And I would just go down the card. I'd have the card right in front of me, the venue, the time, and that was what I would go from. Everything else was just ad-libbed, but I pretty much say the same thing, but each arena had different guys there. So you'd have to move it around, and it trained me really well, not just for my voice, but also coming up with stuff on the fly. And that helped me tremendously when we would do arenas and stuff like that. So it was a great training. I couldn't have had a better. That's why I credit Vince McMahon for everything that I've been able to do, just not only for the opportunity to do that, but to do what I did, but also we did studio work, live arenas where you'd have to go out and talk to the crowd, backstage interviews. It was just you did everything. So the training ground there, and you, most of it was live. So you, as Vince used to say, nothing can go wrong. You're driving without a rearview mirror. Once
Hmm.
it's done, it's done. And it was just a tremendous place to, as a young talent, to learn. And I still use the techniques that I learned way back when, and it was all because of the WWE.
When you are working, I know, like, obviously Howard Finkel, you said, is kind of like leading you through, but are you working with Vince at all? Are you working maybe is John Filippelli there at this point? Are you working with him? Like who's like like the executive TV producer, if you will, that you're working with?
Well, to the day I think Vince left, he was still hands on with everything. Vince was there for everything. Um, he wouldn't necessarily be there when they used to have these big cubes that they traveled around with. They were soundproof cubes, and they'd have two of them going. And that's when the guys would all come in with TV tapings, and they'd have to do their generic interviews. But whenever it was a pay per view, or when we did Saturday night's main event, uh, anything like that, Vince was, yes, right there in the room. And I think back to that time of doing those, and I still have nightmares of thinking you could never screw up. From my position, you could never screw up because you have, sometimes, let's say it was a Royal Rumble or something like that, where you had three or four guys in the interview, and each one had to say something, and you had to get the order right. You had to be able to transition to them, and the pressure of, if you're the one that screws that up, you're the mic stand basically. And so you never wanted to falter. You never wanted. And with Vince in the room, I mean, after a year or so, I got used to it, but not really, because all you needed was that look from him, you know, and you're just destroyed. So that was another thing about handling any kind of pressure. I said from that point on, nothing ever has shaken me. And doing news afterwards, and I did national conventions where there's thousands of people around you, and the light goes on and you got to go and you're live. That's pressure, but it still never matched being in one of those interview rooms with Vince McMahon off on the wings, and you doing the interview. That's what you call that. Was pressure.
He was like, everyone kind of says not a slave driver, but he's just nuts. It's got to be his way. He's got a certain thing. He really was like kind of how everybody says he's like kind of over the top, really, even with all the announcers and all the commentators. That's really how he is. How he is. He's just nutty, and it has to do with his way.
Yeah, and you can't. That was the thing, you really couldn't argue with how hard he wanted you to work, because he worked harder than you did. I don't know if the man ever slept.
Hmm.
They used to, I remember, Pat Patterson and Bruce, and they would be at his house in Greenwich, planning out pay-per-views or whatever. When they would have these marathons, they'd be there for days. And when you were in that circle, that's just was your life. Kevin Dunn, to his credit, be all of his talent, but his greatest talent was being able to be around Vince and deal and know how he operated. So yeah, he would. That's the way Vince had a hand in every single thing, no matter what it was, down to the smallest detail. I remember those production meetings, and he would just notice these details of things that you had to pay attention to, and remember this and that, and I would just be blown away. Like, how does he keep all that stuff straight? That's insane. But that was him. And I didn't work with him for the last 30 years, but I knew people that still did, and throughout that whole process, and they said he never changed up until the end. Crazy.
So, like, when you're initially there, obviously, event center and stuff, do you like doing that more, or do you like doing the interviews, like interviewing the guy and, being like the backstage interviewer? Which do you like better?
Oh, the event center was brutal. It was but it's what kept me there, because nobody else could do it. I mean, just
Right.
physically, I would literally sit in that chair. We had a studio in in Stanford, where It was basically a table set up, the camera in front of me, uh, a green screen behind me. I hate to break the window for everybody, but that all those monitors and stuff behind me, that was a tape loop. But I would sit there for at least 8 hours a day, 4 days a week. It would take me. At one point, we were doing near 100 markets a week. And as I mentioned, that each one of the shows had 3 hits in it. So you'd have to do one for each show. All of the shows, multiply that. Plus, we started doing Sky Television. So we were doing stuff for international. It was just kept getting more and more. And I remember there were points where if one of the boys got hurt, Howard would call me. They had a red phone on the table, and he would call me and say, the Berserker blew out his shoulder or something. You have to redo these 10 markets. And it would usually be at the end of the day where I barely had any voice left anyway. And then I have to go back in and fix these because they had a show that weekend. And it was just killer. It was, but I also realized that's why I like to think they liked the other stuff I did, but I knew that was my main reason for doing it. They had tried to bring in other people because I had gone to Vince and said, I want to do other things too. I think I'm capable of that. And I knew that, Gene couldn't do all of it. And I wanted to get in there and do that stuff. And they brought in a couple other people and they couldn't do it. And so I just knew that was my main gig. But answering your question, I loved going to the arenas. I loved the opportunity to do the interviews, whatever they would let me do. And when I got the chance to be on Saturday night's main event, I thought that was awesome because it was NBC, it was network television on at the same time that Saturday Night Live was on. So I love doing the other stuff. I love doing the stupid Coliseum home videos. When people look at the craziness that Alfred and I did, we just winged a lot of that stuff because early on, before it really took off and they were selling those tapes like crazy and they were in video stores everywhere.
Yep.
It was kind of an experiment to see how would they do. So it was the fact that Alfred and I did those. It's just the fact that we lived in Stamford. That's where a lot of the opportunity came up to do things because I lived there. So I started hosting those, but it was basically just shoot some wraparounds, get to this match, then go to this match. And we would literally go into a prop closet and grab stuff and go out there and just make it up. Where do we got to go to? Well, we got to go to a match with Tugboat. Okay. And they had stuff where we were wearing, sailing stuff
Right.
And we would make the whole tape out like that. And then when they started taking off, that's when you saw that they started pumping more money in. We had more sets. I saw somebody sent me a clip the other day of the Star Trek one that we did, which was so much fun. Got to do a really bad William Shatner, and Alfred was doing Scotty, his Scottish accent. Beam us up there, it's good,
Yeah.
And then it got a little more pressure. And then they started paying more attention to what we were doing. And I remember early on that Vince saw some of the stuff and he was, "What the hell are they doing? Tell them to stop. It's about wrestling." And then, of course, no, it wasn't. And then they loved it. Then we started doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So it got better in the sense that they put more money in, and we started getting better sets and stuff to do. But at the same time, then there became more pressure on us to do them, and then they started looking at it and have to approve it, and so it wasn't as much fun. But we did have a blast, and I'd like to see the count someday how many we did, because I have absolutely no idea how many, but I know
I'm
that
not sure,
a
but
lot
it's a
of people
lot.
still have them. Yeah, they
Yeah.
should
Oh,
put them
hell
to
yeah.
digital. I hope they should put them to digital. I think people would love them.
Yeah, they need to put more stuff to digital and get more
Oh,
stuff out there for sure. Yeah, and
we
get
did
it on
we
Peacock
did
or
so
Netflix
many
or whatever.
things. Yeah, we really did. It was just that's what was the fun part. I had the event center I kind of earned my keep, and then the rest of it was fun doing stuff with Bobby and Prime Time when I got the chance to host Prime Time, and did Spotlight with Sherry when she would beat the living daylights out of me every week. So yeah, but that was the fun stuff. That's when I really had a great time.
Now, there's so many good guys. I feel like that's the golden era, if you will, of wrestling. That Hogan era, with
Yeah.
obviously Hulk and Macho and Warrior and Piper. I mean, there's a million guys. Brad and Shawn. I mean, there's so many top guys there. Who was somebody that you didn't really particularly like, maybe interviewing, not really working with, but like as far as wrestler wise, was there anybody out that was like just out there you didn't particularly like working with them as much?
Well, yeah, there were. Well, people always ask me all the time about Warrior,
Mhm.
and Jim was one of those you didn't know what you were going to get when you worked with him. It could be the one that was whatever things he was putting in his body were having some kind of impact on him. There were other times when he was very sweet. I used to have a lot of conversations with him, and really felt for him a lot. I think that as far as the guys working with him, it was a lot tougher for them to accept him and feel for him because their livelihood depended on what he could do in the ring, and he whether he meant to or didn't, but he could hurt you. He was very stiff, but he could be really prickly when you were doing stuff with him in the interviews. If of course, you could tell him, or he could have an idea, or they could tell him where he wanted to go. But you had those interviews, just my God, to this day, I still can't figure them out. Uh, you can listen to them. It's like Bob Dylan lyrics or something, where,
Yep.
okay, I guess that means something. There are words, and his fans loved it. They loved it to this day. I think they have websites devoted to uh, Jim's interviews. But it made it difficult for someone like me because you didn't know where he was going. And then there were other times where, you know, Vince was very, very adamant about me keeping my credibility. I was kind of the normal, the credible journalist, supposedly, who was kind of observing this and bringing that to people. That was very important to him, which I thought was that was my gimmick. And so he didn't like the guys. Every once in a while, they could grab my lapel or something and rough me up a little bit, but it wasn't you couldn't take it too far. And with Jim, I never knew. He would go off sometimes, and you'd be, dude, you can't do that. You can't. But that's what the way it was with him. But I definitely uh, loved and hated him at times. I think he would be the best way to describe it because I did feel for him. He was thrown into a lot at the time. He didn't come from the old school where most of the guys did back then. They came from families, generations of wrestlers. And there was this collision of when Vince started bringing people in from the outside. I was one of those guys. It took a long time for me to get in and for those guys to trust me. And you need that when you're doing interviews with them because for both of you to feel that way. Because once you are comfortable, no matter where they go, you can help them. And because you know them and they trust you and the interviews are better that way. But he was thrown into this world and the fame came really quickly. It wasn't a matter of years where some guys, it takes a while. Someone like Bret Hart, where when he came in there and they didn't even know what to do with him. Bret was an incredibly talented wrestler. But if you think back then, they had all these ideas. They were going to at one point have him ride a horse. And I mean, it was just crazy stuff. But he had to find his way and he was given the opportunity to get there. And then with the Hart Foundation and everything that went on from there. But think about the Warrior. When he got in there, he was shaking the ropes and dun, 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 you hear that music. And it was all, his rise was so quick. And it's the same with any amount of fame, whether it's as an actor or a performer or a sports star or whatever. When it comes at you that fast, it's very difficult to deal with. And then when you don't have the greatest people around you advising you and you're listening to them, it doesn't bode well. And so, sure, could he have been nicer, I think, or handled it better? Yeah. But at the same time, he was deep down, I think, a good person and just was lost in that world. And I don't know. The very few people who would have been able to handle it any better. So he was one of them. Sid was always interesting
Yeah.
because you never knew what how he was going to be. Um, and also, like, Randy turned out to be one of my favorite people in the World Wrestling Federation, because he was another guy. It took me a couple of years before we got to that point with him, because Randy trusted nobody. And when we had an incident where he'd roughed me up pretty good, but was trying to get me to kneel, and I confronted him. I had to, because it was undermining who I was supposed to be in front of the camera. And I didn't know which way that was going to go. I don't know if he was going to smack me or what, but I think after I confronted him, he respected me for doing it. And after that point, I was in his inner circle. I mean, he trusted me. And whenever we were at arenas and that kind of thing, I'd go into his dressing area or whatever and chat with him, and be around Liz. And I just respected what he did in the ring, because he's one of those guys who, and said it many times, that, he'd come up through the ranks of these small arenas, and his father had his own promotion, and with Lanny. And so he really, really, really appreciated the business and knew what the opportunity he got. He wanted to be a professional baseball player. That didn't work, but he was an incredibly talented athlete, and found what was going to make him the best, one of the best ever. And every time he went into that ring, he gave everything he had. He really took to heart the fact that people use their good money to come to an arena and see him, and he delivered. Not just with what he could do in the ring, but also the showmanship he had with all the different outfits, and his promos. I think he was one of the best ever at doing promos. So he's another guy that initially I was like, man, how am I ever going to work with this guy? Hulk was great. I have nothing bad to say about Hulk working with him. He was always very professional with me. It's just that I think when I got there, his rise to fame was just so far out. He was in the stratosphere, and Gene was his guy, and he brought Gene along with him. And most of the time wanted to do interviews with Gene, because he was very comfortable with Gene. But every time I worked with him, he was awesome. I wish I would have gotten the chance to have gotten closer to him, but it just was the timing of it. That's the point where he was coming in limousines and doing his shtick and getting back in and see you later. So, but as we talked about, I certainly, his contributions to professional wrestling are unmatched, and have a tremendous amount of respect for him and what he did for the business.
Amazing, obviously, with the
Yeah.
Hulkster. When he's kind of working his way out, right, in like 92, 93, he's kind of, ready to, leave the WWF eventually. In summer of 93, he will leave. But before that, it's
Yeah.
interesting. They go with Brett, and obviously we know the story of the steroid trial. Let's get a real good wrestler who doesn't do steroids, and he won't have anything with him. Well, we're going to go a different direction. And hey, this guy is really popular in all these international markets. He's huge in Canada. He's huge in the UK. He's huge in Germany. Let's go with Brett. Was the talk ever that Warrior was supposed to get that spot initially, but obviously the steroid stuff, did that kind
Oh,
of
of
put that to the
course.
side?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Warrior was supposed to be the heir apparent. He was going to help continue that reign in professional wrestling and keep it at that level. Um, but unfortunately, that we all know what happened, with the mixture of, as I mentioned, whatever was going on in the
Yeah.
head of Jim Hellwig, and the people that were whispering in his ear. It was in his hand, and it was there for the taking. And so, yeah, when it came down to that, and I have unbelievable respect for Bret Hart. Man, you talk about the epitome of professional wrestling and its roots, and just being a tactician, and his attention to detail. And he wasn't this big, massive guy. He every ounce in his body he used to become one of the greatest ever. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't there. He was tremendously popular, but you had to reach those heights. You had to have that same appeal as someone like Hulk Hogan or the Ultimate Warrior. And all Warrior had to do was run down that runway, shake the ropes, and he was done. People didn't care what he did from that point. He was going to, do some stiff clothesline, cover the guy, and head out. That wasn't Bret. So he just, I think Vince realized that kind of early on after making that deal. But Bret was as big a superstar as we'll ever see, but it just wasn't at that level, and wasn't going to happen that way. And there was nothing else he could have done to make it happen.
Yeah, that Hogan level. That's one. Even Warrior couldn't attain that level. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
It's hard to do. Really Savage in '88. Hogan's
yeah,
still there, obviously with the Mega Powers, but him as champion the whole year, he was able to attain it. But
yeah.
that's a tough spot. I mean, that's a hard
Oh,
spot to be put
yeah. Oh,
into.
yeah. And to stay there is amazing to do it, and for as long as he did. And the point where they maybe the greatest tribute is the fact that they had to keep bringing him back. So
Yeah.
yeah, they needed each other. They really did. Terry's foray into Hollywood was not tremendously successful, but they all, even The Rock now, The Rock's realizes his roots and what got him to the dance, or whatever you want to say. So,
Yeah.
you know, that should be their first love forever, and they continue to pay it back, and in professional wrestling keeps giving to them to this
Now,
day.
absolutely. So why did you
Yeah.
leave the WWF? I guess it was 93-ish or somewhere around there.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I don't think I was really mature at the time and realized the opportunities that I'd been given. Um, and I had always wanted to do other things. I wanted to get maybe more into entertainment television and that kind of thing. But there was a lot happening also with the WWE at the time, and Vince was convinced I was going to go down south. That's when everybody was starting to go down to the
Yeah.
WCW. And I told him, no, I'm not. If I'm going to be working professional wrestling, I'm going to work for you. I don't think he didn't really believe me, even when I left. But I've told the story that when I ended up working for WWOR down in New York and Jersey, of course, that's where it is, Secaucus, when I went there.
Oh yeah.
But I remember the first night that I anchored, and it was about a year after I'd left the WWE, and I kind of worked my way up through the ranks at that station and got the opportunity to anchor. The next day, I got a telegram from Vince at my house, congratulating me, saying, "Thanks for making us look good." I still have it to this day,
Wow.
and I think it was two things. I think he was saying to me, "I appreciate you that you were straight. You didn't with me and didn't go down and work for and lie to me and then go down there." And the other thing was that I brought a lot of credibility to the fact that here was somebody a year or so before that I was, and whenever they talked about me in the papers, the Post or whatever, it was always former wrestling announcer, but I did become an anchor. And I think it just added credibility that, well, why not? That's legitimate. I, went and paid my dues and did whatever I had to do, but it brought credibility to his business. And I think that Vince
Big
really
time.
appreciated that.
Yeah, I feel like that, like wow, look at Mooney. He's big time now. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
that WWF was a big time, but like the way, like away from WWF, he's big time now for
Yeah.
sure as an
Yeah.
anchor.
Yeah, so I think that's what he appreciated that because it did it. He was always wanted to legitimize the business by going into different ventures with the movies and the bodybuilding and the other stuff that we did. And I think that was just something that he felt, thanks for helping us out here. That gives us that view to people that, hey, we're just performers and entertainers, and we can be legit journalists as well. It's all about being honest and doing your job. And
Yeah.
that's the way I looked at it. I just thought that, hey, that was
When
cool.
when they bring you back, right, and you like it for several projects, and who's the person that contact? Is that like a Kevin Dunn thing, or who's the kind of that was always kind of bringing you back to do those projects?
Well, I was gone for a long time where I didn't no contact or anything. Um, and then, but I still knew people there, with the company, and I would talk to them every once in a while. And one of the first things that they contacted me, and I don't know how many years ago it was now, but they asked me if I'd come back and do. It was a Randy Savage, I guess, matches they'd found that had not aired or had not been distributed, and they brought me back there and I did this thing where I was in the warehouse. I don't know if anybody remembers doing that, but I had a blast doing it, and it was kind of this premise that I'd been in the warehouse all this time and living in the warehouse, and so I had a lot of fun. And then the one I really had a good time doing is they brought me back to do. It was before the I think it was the 2000th episode of Raw, and I did with Peter Rosenberg and the premise, it was going to be before the show. They had the pre-show, and the whole premise of it was that Peter had taken a shortcut through the warehouse and had lost this very important list of the top 25 moments of Raw or something. And he comes into the warehouse, and I'm there, and I've been in, limbo, living in purgatory there. And I'm just so glad somebody's come into the warehouse, and we go through the whole place. And he gets in the ring, and the list falls out of his pocket, and I grab it. So I know he's going to have to come back when he leaves. And Corey Graves, he goes back and says, where's the list? And he goes, it's right here. And he doesn't have a list. So he goes back to the warehouse, and then he confronts me, and I have it. And I thought, I said, they got to bring me back to do a show with Peter. I mean, we were just magic together. It was so much fun, and nothing happened. They brought me back, and I did something for the 2000th show. And then, I just thought, yeah, this is going to be fun. I would love to do. Maybe I couldn't do it a full time, but I thought that'd be great. I could go and do this, and it'd be a blast. And they ended up doing a warehouse show, but they did it with other people who was pretty dry and straight. And I just thought that was a big missed opportunity. But anyway, they have brought me back several times since, and I've done a bunch of interviews for the documentaries, and it's really nice still having that connection. And the fact that they value my memories, that they want to include them in these documentaries, and so that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is cool. Like to be, a talking head, because obviously that means like, hey, everybody remembers Shawn Mooney. Let's get his, opinion on this subject or that subject. So that's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. People should go. It's on YouTube. I know that little bit that we did. You should check it out, because it was really well done, the way they did it, the way they edited it. And Peter was great, and I had a lot of fun playing off him, and it was we were a good team. So I hope someday I get to do that again. That would be great.
Now, as we hit the wind down here, we head towards the finish. I got to ask, is there really an Ian Mooney? Is there really a Betty Mooney? I mean, do these people really exist?
You really want me to reveal all these secrets? I always talk about that bum, my brother Ian, who still owes me money. But I actually did. I had my podcast, Prime Time with Shawn Mooney, which we did about 200 episodes. They're still out there.
Nice.
You can check them out. I talked to pretty much everybody who was around, and the ones that aren't on there are the ones I asked anyway. But yeah. So I thought it'd be kind of funny to do an episode where I play the two parts of Ian and Shawn, and there's a conversation between us. It was fun. Well, the way Ian came about because, and I was very disappointed the way that all happened. Is they needed a host for Spotlight, uh, which was Spotlight of Wrestling or whatever it was back then. It was one of our cable shows we did, and Vince had done it with Miss Elizabeth for a little bit, and like anything else, Vince would do it for a few months or whatever, but then he'd just get buried with work and kind of decide, I don't need to do this, and then he'd pass it off. But I did the event center, and the event center appeared in Spotlight too, so I couldn't be in two places. So I think Bruce came up with the idea, well, let's have him be somebody else. And I thought, oh, this is awesome. I get to be a heel. I could be
Yeah.
bad Shawn. And Ian came about, and they would do my hair differently, and they got different clothes for me to wear. And I kept telling Bruce, well, let me be a heel. And he goes, no, you can't. You got to do this because you're going to have people. I'm like, why? Just let me do it. I envisioned this thing where I would be doing the event center, and Ian would come out with a guitar and smash it over my head and then take over the event center. Like, I had all these great ideas.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I always would tell Bruce, we're both baby faces. It sucks. You got to have something in there. So whatever that run was that we had, I don't know how long I did it, but then I hosted the show with Sensational Sherry for I don't know how many episodes. And that, I loved Sherry, but Sherry, man, she was tougher than many of the superstars. I don't think there was a lot of superstars wouldn't have messed with her. And she got a kick out of being stiff with me on those sets. And she used to smack me, play tricks up, rib me all the time. You can see if you look back at some of those episodes where she did one. I remember one where she ties me to a chair, and they put a sign on my feet. They taped it to my shoes. And the idea was she was supposed to roll me backwards, and they put like some cushions behind it. So when she flipped the chair up, I'd land on the thing. Well, she kicks the cushions out of the way and flipped the chair. And as it comes up, it's supposed to, the sign said something like "Help me" or something like that. I can't remember, but I smacked that set, and I saw stars. And she used to do that stuff all the time. There was one show where we ended where during the credit part, we were kind of wrapping it up, and I'm saying, okay, folks, thanks for joining us. Be sure and catch this, whatever. And she's throwing stuff at me, and she starts out, she's offset because she's mad at me. I said, so she's like, first she's throwing like pillows at me, and then it's boxes, and then it's like chairs. I mean, I'm dodging, like real stiff objects that would have knocked me out.
Yeah.
Because she just got off on doing that. She just thought that was hilarious. That I was like, I don't think she ever drew blood, but man, I had some bruises.
She was ripping you. Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh yeah. But she was awesome, and never got enough credit for what she did for not just professional wrestling, but for women in professional wrestling. She really, really, they owe her, because she was one of the first. I mean, it's not that we didn't have professional, very good professional wrestlers who were women. It's just that she became mainstream with them. She crossed the line where she was toe-to-toe with the superstars. And she was really the first to do that. And I don't think she ever got the credit that she deserved for what she did. Gave up a lot. And she gave up a lot to do it. Yeah.
Yep, totally agree. So, of course, we're talking about the glory days, the Hogan era, the golden era of wrestling, of course, which it's great that Hastel Toys is still making these figures of the golden era of wrestling. So give us one last push for the Hastel Toys.
Yeah, it's go to the website. It's hasteltoy.com, and that's HASTTEL toy.com. And they have them on there. Alfred and I are on there. And also there's, a bunch of other things. Harvey Whippleman was part of the set that came out. And you can buy a set of 6 or a set of 4, or you can get us individually. But check them out, because it's just really cool too. And I think it's awesome that a lot of these guys that were big superstars and and favorites of a lot of people, that they never got a chance to get a action figure that Hastel Hasteltoy has done this, and it's they're really really well done. I am so impressed by what they do, and it was great. So go there, and then we've got and I've thought about maybe bringing back primetime, my primetime with Shawn Mooney again, the podcast. But I just like to know what people think, and if you'd love to see me get back in front of that mic doing that, I'd like to hear from you. Or just you want to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me at Primetime Mooney, primetimemooney@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. And I'm looking forward to that show in England.
Yeah, in the
I'm
UK, baby.
very
Yeah.
anxious to go back and just see the people there, because it was a great time in professional wrestling and for the WWE, because that's where it really started. Now they're everywhere, they're all over the world. And but that is where it really began. And I just appreciate the fact that people remember that. I'm hoping they remember me when I get over there, but I'm coming. So
Yes.
yeah.
Hey, will we see the next generation of Mooney in the WWE? Because I know we were talking before about your son. Will we see the next generation of Mooney
Not in
on
front of
for
a camera. I don't
WWE?
think in front of a
Yeah.
camera, but he's doing really well with the company, and there's a great future ahead for the World Wrestling Entertainment, because they're with a great company now. Endeavor owns a lot of different things, but I think more so is that they are letting the people that know how to run that business run the business. And I think a lot of people are impressed with Triple H and what he's doing with the company. And they've got some really good people behind the scenes. I know a lot of them that are part of the creative team. And even though Kevin Dunn is now gone, and Chris Chambers, who is another creative force with them, they're doing as well as they've ever done. And I think that Endeavor is going to allow them to continue to do that. So it's exciting, and my son really loves working for them. He's traveling all over the place and had so many great opportunities. And I love about him is he keeps everything pretty kayfabe. There's a lot of people there that have no idea, but that's just who he is. And I think that's really cool that I'm going to make my own way here. And few people know, but it's very cool to see
It's
another
awesome.
generation continue, because that company gave me so many opportunities and set me on my path for a career that I still am collecting dividends from. It's still a big part of my life, and loved every minute of it. Should have
Love it.
stayed a little longer, but
Yep.
that's the way it played out. And I no regrets, and loved every minute.
All right. Awesome. Shawn, thank you so much for all the time today. Really appreciate it.
Enjoyed coming on, John. I'd love to come back when the other one comes out, or well, we can always find a lot to talk about, and who knows
Oh, God. Yes.
who
Yes.
knows what I'm going to do next. I'll keep you
Love
posted.
it.